the noble young lady fell in love with a painting. Whenever the night grew quiet, she would hold the portrait close to her chest and whisper her love to it until she fell asleep, satisfied and at peace. But a painting was never a real person. So, in order to find the man of her dreams, she sent out a nationwide proclamation seeking a husband. The news caused an uproar across the country, because whoever won her hand would not only marry the most beautiful woman, Ruri, but also inherit a fortune beyond imagination. More importantly, Ruri's family, known for generations as master incense makers, possessed a legendary treasure called Tadaiji. It was said to be a piece of sacred wood that granted immense power to its owner. Rumor had it, anyone who obtained it could rule the entire land. After several rounds of competition, only 4 men remained and were invited to Ruri's estate to face her final test. Each of them was a man of high status. One was Robo, a government official. Another was Tamayoshi, a samurai from the countryside. The third was Tansui, a wealthy merchant. It was worth noting that Tansui's wife had passed away not long ago. The fourth suitor, however, never arrived. Instead, a man named Kusurayuri the medicine seller took his place. Seeing this, Robo couldn't help but ask why he was there, but Kusurayuri calmly replied that there was an evil spirit in this house. None of them knew that Kusurayuri was, in truth, an exorcist. They ignored his words, thinking only that they had one less rival to worry about. Then, led eagerly by the maid, they proceeded to the chambers where the final selection would take place. Since Ruri's family were incense masters, the contest naturally revolved around fragrances. Each of the 4 contestants simply needed to pick out 2 incense pieces with the exact same scent. The first fragrance was presented to Robo. After smelling it, he felt refreshed and calm, as though he were bathing in the breeze of spring. Next was the merchant Tansui. To him, the scent was reminiscent of money itself. Then came Tamayoshi, the samurai who knew nothing about incense. To him, it smelled exactly like horse manure. Among all 4, only Kusurayuri seemed to smell nothing at all. And so, one by one, they finished evaluating the 5 incense pieces. Everyone wrote down their answers, waiting for Ruri to announce the results. Before that, the maid escorted them to the guest rooms to rest for a while. At that moment, Tansui excused himself, saying he needed to use the restroom. Robo and Tamayoshi soon followed with their own excuses. It was clear that each of them harbored ulterior motives. All of them desired the fabled treasure, Tadaiji, believing it could grant them the power to unite the world. Yet, after searching everywhere, they found nothing. Eventually, they returned to their rooms to await the results, but as soon as they entered, they saw Kusurayuri standing on top of the table. He declared that the spirit had already appeared. The moment he spoke, the scales on the floor suddenly pointed toward the adjacent room. Kusurayuri immediately plastered the walls with talismans, then opened the nearby door. What greeted their eyes was a room drenched in blood, and on the floor lay a corpse. The dead man was the 4th contestant who never arrived. Before anyone could react, Kusurayuri opened the other door. There stood Ruri herself, but the next second, she suddenly collapsed dead. The 3 men fell into madness. They did not fear for their own lives, nor did they grieve for the deceased Ruri. Instead, they were consumed by greed. Each thinking only of the treasure, they rushed into the rooms, searching frantically. They seemed to have forgotten that Ruri's corpse lay right beside them. The ugliness of human desire left Kusurayuri speechless. He hadn't expected that fear could be so meaningless when compared to greed. Just then, an elderly maid spoke up. She said that the Tadaiji had been hidden somewhere safe. Then she added that her eyesight wasn't very good, and asked the men what had happened. Upon hearing that the maid knew where the Tadaiji was, Robo immediately came up with an idea. The other 2 caught on quickly and agreed to help. Together, they decided to conceal the truth. That Ruri was already dead. They made an excuse to send the maid away, and after a short discussion, they came to an agreement. They would continue the incense contest as if nothing had happened. No one outside knew that Ruri was dead, so as long as a winner was decided and the wedding took place, the victor could still rightfully inherit everything. Afterward, they could announce her death publicly. As for the 2 who lost, they would have to keep silent about what had truly happened. Kusurayuri, hearing their plan, withdrew from the competition and volunteered to be the judge instead. Then, he began rummaging through his medicine chest. They didn't understand why he did that, but having one less competitor was, after all, a good thing. When everything was ready, Kusurayuri presented the first incense piece. Then he calmly announced that, by mistake, he had mixed oleander into one of the 5 incense samples. The leaves of oleander could be used in medicine, but its sap was highly poisonous. Just one breath of it was enough to kill. Now, with it mixed into the samples, even Kusurayuri himself couldn't tell which one it was. Continuing the contest would mean risking their lives. Kusurayuri thought they would surely give up, but the temptation of Tadaji was far too strong. Each of the three decided to gamble, hoping someone else would be the first to inhale the poison. Tamayoshi went first, but what he smelled was the scent of blood. Kusurayuri told him that this incense was made specifically for him, crafted from the blood-stained paper of a sliding door, the same paper that had soaked up the blood of the man he killed. Before coming here with the others, Tamayoshi had secretly visited once before. He had hoped to gain an advantage, but the fourth contestant had arrived earlier. That man had looked down on Tamayoshi, the country samurai, mocking him and saying he wasn't worthy to compete. Tamayoshi, who had long suffered ridicule back home, wanted to change his fate by obtaining the Tadaji. He finally lost control and cut the man down with his sword. Afterward, he fled the scene, pretending it was his first time arriving at the estate. When Kusurayuri finished revealing the truth, Tamayoshi could faintly see the corpse turning into a vengeful spirit, slowly advancing toward him. Terrified, he swung his sword wildly, but in the end, the spirit claimed his life. Now, only 2 contestants remained before they could recover from the shock. Kusurayuri presented the second incense. This time, it was Tansue's turn to smell, but what he sensed was the stench of burning hair. Kusurayuri told him directly, this incense was made from Ruri's hair. Then he began to reveal the truth behind Ruri's death. Earlier, when Tansue said he needed to use the restroom, he had actually gone secretly to Ruri's room. He stood outside her door, begging her to choose him as the final winner. There, at the doorway, Tansue poured out his heart to Ruri, saying that the other 3 men were all only after Tadaji, and that he was the only one who truly loved her. But no matter how long he waited, there was no reply from inside, so he took it upon himself to open the door, and to his shock, he saw Ruri, holding a painting in her arms, whispering her love to it. That scene had nothing to do with Tansue, but the moment he saw it, it felt to him as though he had caught his own wife betraying him. Overcome with rage, Tansue lost all control, and stabbed Ruri to death with a pair of chopsticks. And, in fact, not long ago, he had killed his own wife in exactly the same way. As Kusurayuri slowly revealed the truth, Lord Tansue was suddenly attacked by a spirit. At that point, only Robo was left alive. When he saw Tansue's gruesome death, he wanted to end the contest then and there, but the thought of Tadaji crept back into his mind, and he decided to continue the game. After smelling the incense, Kusurayuri suddenly said, that particular incense might have contained oleander. The fear of death finally brought Robo back to his senses. He tried desperately to flee the mansion, but in his panic, he tripped over the threshold, tumbled several times, and struck his head on the floor dead. Kusurayuri watched it all unfold without a flicker of emotion. Now, he was the only one left. In truth, everyone else who came to compete had already been dead for some time. The spirit known as Nu had trapped their souls in this place, forcing them to endlessly relive the moments of their deaths as torment. And that spirit was none other than the manifestation of the Tadaji itself. Nu had spread false rumors, claiming that whoever obtained the Tadaji could rule the world, to lure in greedy men one after another, and torture them until they died. By this point, Kusurayuri had already uncovered the full truth. He drew his exorcising blade, which instantly transformed into its most powerful form. With one hand, he blocked the spirit's attack with ease. Then, using his talismans, he sealed the creature in place, and with a single strike, he cut it down, turning it to dust. As Nu's presence faded into nothingness, the so-called treasure, Tadaji, split cleanly in two. Its true form was nothing more than a piece of rotten wood. It was human greed that had turned it into a monstrous spirit, but the greed of mankind was far too vast, far more than a small estate like this could ever contain. A decaying piece of wood could never be a treasure that unites the world, just as endless greed can never fill the emptiness of the human heart. As Kusurayuri sheathed his blade and walked away, the scent of blood and incense slowly faded from the courtyard, leaving behind only silence. Yet human desire never truly ends. There will always be others chasing after hollow legends, repeating this tragedy again and again, a tragedy where no one ever wins. The woman's only wish was for her daughter, Oku, to marry into a wealthy family. She even had her practice how to please men from a young age. In the end, Oku did marry a powerful samurai, but her married life was nothing like what her mother had promised. In the samurai's household, Oku became the lowest of all servants. Everyone treated her as they pleased, summoning or dismissing her at will. Any hint of hesitation or disobedience would bring brutal beatings. The samurai's family often said cruel and humiliating things right in front of her, and Oku could only endure it all in silence. Her mother had filled her head with every kind of knowledge since childhood, but she never taught her how to fight back when she was mistreated. Until one day, Oku couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the kitchen knife she used every day to cook and slaughtered all 12 members of the samurai's household. Their blood splattered so far that it dyed the plum blossoms red. As Oku waited for her execution in prison, a strange man appeared before her out of thin air. He claimed to be a medicine seller, and his name was Kusurayuri. He believed a weak woman couldn't possibly kill so many people on her own. There must have been a spirit at work, but no matter how many questions Kusurayuri asked, Oku kept silent. Then suddenly, the prison door burst open in a cloud of smoke. A masked man lunged toward Kusurayuri. He immediately sensed that the intruder was the spirit itself. However, the exorcism sword could only be drawn once the entire truth was known. For now, Kusurayuri could only protect Oku from harm. The masked man seized the chance to spew a cloud of purple smoke. After inhaling it, Kusurayuri's face suddenly became covered with a mask. Then his facial features vanished completely, and he collapsed to the ground. But the masked man didn't intend to harm Oku. Instead, he carried her out of the prison. It was he who had appeared in Oku's darkest hour, helping her find release from her suffering. Unlike the samurai who treated her as a mere plaything, the masked man truly fell in love with this pitiful woman. He wanted Oku to marry him, and Oku, too, felt affection toward her savior, so she agreed to his proposal. The masked man danced with joy when he heard her answer. Before Oku's eyes, he conjured up a small wedding chamber. They changed into ceremonial robes, and there, inside that tiny room, they held their wedding. Their wedding guests were masks hanging on the walls. Each one offered its blessings aloud. The ceremony was simple, but it made Oku happier than when she had married the samurai. Once the ritual was complete, Kusurayuri appeared again. This time, he was fully prepared. He used a mirror to reflect the purple smoke back at the masked man. Wounded, the spirit's true form was finally revealed. It was the mask lying on the ground. Kusurayuri swiftly sealed it with paper talismans. Then he turned to Oku and asked her whom she had really killed. His words sent Oku spiraling into her memories, and at last, the truth began to surface. After her father's death, the family lost all income. Oku became the tool through which her mother could achieve her dreams. Her mother hoped that by marrying her daughter into wealth, they could escape poverty, so she forced Oku to study music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, to wash, cook, and clean every day, to become the perfect wife in everyone's eyes. If Oku ever made the slightest mistake, she was harshly scolded. But Oku loved her mother deeply. She wanted to help her fulfill that dream. To do so, she suppressed every bit of her own happiness. While other children played freely, she practiced the zither under her mother's watchful eyes. Eventually, under her mother's urging, she married a man she didn't love. Her mother had even humbled herself to beg for that marriage union with a samurai. But such a marriage was doomed from the start. Her mother never thought about that. All she cared about was seeing her daughter married into wealth, so she herself could finally live comfortably. Deep down, Oku longed for care and understanding, but in her mother's eyes, she was only a tool, and in the samurai's household, she was nothing but a servant. No one ever truly cared about how she felt. Oku often looked up at the sky from the kitchen, yearning to be free like a bird, but in reality, she was trapped, unable to escape. Kusurayuri told her, "When you wish to leave this place, it becomes a prison, but when you wish to stay, it becomes a fortress." The emotions that Oku had suppressed for so long eventually transformed into a spirit. The masked man was her inner demon. Her marriage to him symbolized her yearning to be loved. In truth, Oku hadn't killed anyone at all. From beginning to end, she had only killed herself. She killed the part of her that longed for freedom, that hated her life, yet couldn't run away for fear of breaking her mother's heart. She killed the self that had been lost little by little, through years of restraint and obedience, perhaps overwhelmed by guilt and regret. She hated herself for not escaping that house sooner, and for destroying her mother's dream through her actions. So even after death, Oku didn't move on. She remained trapped in the world she had created, reliving the illusion of murdering the samurai's family, while forgetting that she had taken her own life. By now, Kusurayuri had uncovered the entire truth. He drew his exorcism sword, which transformed into its radiant golden form. and granted peace to the sorrowful woman. The little bird in the painting took flight from its branch, symbolizing Oku's release at last. The bird on the branch spread its wings and flew away. Oku's soul, long bound by obsession, was freed by Kusurayuri's exorcism ritual. All the suppressed desires, the betrayed love, and the revenge woven from fantasy turned into a wind of freedom. She no longer had to be her mother's tool. She no longer had to be a servant in the samurai's house. She no longer had to struggle between herself and submission. At last, she became the true Oku, belonging only to herself.